Egg roll.
Bacon roll.
Vegetarian.
Sausage roll.
Bacon.
Vegan sausage roll. Great.
Fig roll.
Ooh, rather dark.
I love a fig roll. Enough talking about food. We're going to talk about Argon 18's Time Trial and Triathlon range of bikes today. Mainly focused on the E119 Tri Plus, to give it its full name. But for ease, I'm going to call it the E119. Argon 18 make 3 different options of triathlon and time trial bikes in their range. They do the E119, the E118 and the E117. The E119 is a triathlon specific time trial bike or triathlon bike. The E118 is a UCI compliant time trial bike, and the E117 is a UCI compliant TT bike that is their entry point bike in the range. Argon 18 offer these 3 different options at varying different price points. If you want to go for the fastest, most aerodynamic and most aerodynamic with a rider on it, the E119 is what you want to go for. It depends on really on what you're doing. For triathlons, if you can afford it, the E119, 100%. If you're doing UCI time trials, the E118 would be what you're looking at. And if you're looking at an entry into time trialing or triathlon, the E117 is a great entry point bike to start with. All test very fast in different ways. Now, to talk about the E119 specifically, what Argon 18 found when they were developing and refining this bike from the previous generation of it was how can we make this bike faster by understanding what it's going to be used for example, an Ironman. So they wanted to make it fast when it was loaded with a rider on it. And how you do that is you start to integrate certain things onto it. So that is integrating tools into the frame, using a storage box by the bottom bracket, producing a much larger bento box which goes into the frame, allowing you to be able to hold more food and nutrition on the top tube box. Then by doing things like integrating the brake calipers in collaboration with TRP to allow you to get a better airflow around the brake, which is marginal gains, but it all helps in the overall picture of a triathlon, an Ironman, or a time trial. Something to mention is I race time trials in the UK. In the UK, time trialing is governed by a different cycling body. We have CTT, which governs time trials in the UK and runs the time trialing races from 10 mile, 25 mile, 50 mile, 100 mile, 12 hour and 24 hour. There are UCI regulated time trials where the bike that I'm using, the E119, would not be allowed. In that case, I would need to be riding an E118. But I don't do UCI time trials, I do CTT time trials, and there's no rules in terms of what bike you can use for those kind of races, which is actually fantastic. One of the aims with the E119 was to make it faster, of course. Everyone wants the new version of the bike to become faster. And they made some pretty good gains on this. They made the frame tested in the wind tunnel 10 watts faster. And that is 10 watts faster with a rider tested on the bike as well. They tested this with various different people and they tested it as the bike on its own, and they found the overall gain, give or take, was about 10 watts as an average across all the different people they tested. It's getting harder and harder for aero bikes, time trial bikes, to get these kind of gains, so 10 watts is pretty significant really. With the newest generation E119, some of the other changes was it's a single beam thing which the TT bars sit on. This helps it with that gains and testing faster, and there's a huge amount of customization and flexibility in that in terms of tweaking and adjusting your setup, increasing or lowering the stack height, going forward or backwards, and also changing the angle. You can change so much of that on the bike without actually having to really purchase or change any proprietary stuff. Now, I've spent a lot of time on time trial bikes over the years and racing them at a pretty high level, so I have a pretty good understanding of my position, and I've also wind tunnel tested my position several times, so I know that it's pretty well optimized. Ultimately, for the kind of time trials I tend to do, comfort is very important on that. But obviously I want to be as aerodynamic as I possibly can. Having this level of flexibility and all the different adapters and spacers really help with me being able to play and tweak and change it quite quickly and easily. And it also helps in the sense that if you wanted to dismantle this bike to travel with it, say you're going to the Ironman World Champs, for example, you can do it pretty easily actually. The geometry on this frame is slightly tweaked from the previous version of it, so it's actually a little bit more aggressive. The bike puts you in a slightly more forward position, which rotates your hips that way, which means you're going to get a better power transfer from all your muscles around the top of your leg, your glutes and everything. The idea of this is very sort of triathlon focused. The idea is to try and make sure that you stay relatively fresh and comfortable on the bike while you're doing the bike leg before you then have to go onto the run leg. Many of you are probably wondering, again, why am I riding a triathlon specific bike as opposed to the UCI legal TT bike? And ultimately it's down to aerodynamics. The triathlon bike has deeper head tube, deeper tubes all around the frame. It's a more aerodynamic frame. This can't be used in UCI races because of the rules and regulations in terms of how aerodynamic the frame can be. Those rules change every year. They might change at some point. It might become available and usable at some point, but for the time being, the rules and regulations stipulate that this bike is too aero for a UCI race effectively. Doesn't matter for triathlons though. The frame set on its own costs £6,000. They do offer two build options, which are £8,000 and £11,000 of different group sets of your choice. There's two different colorways. Mine is the Dig Me Beach Reflex colorway, which personally I think is the nicer colorway of the two. It really changes color in the light. The photos don't do it justice, it's really beautiful. Argon 18 are very lucky to work with some incredibly talented triathletes now and over the years, and this bike has taken so much of their learnings from the previous bikes in the range and also from their athletes that they sponsor on how to advance it and how to make it faster and better. Tyre clearance is slightly wider than the previous version. You can run a 28mm tyre on it, which now we're seeing the rim profiles coming slightly wider. A 28mm tyre not only gives you a comfort benefit, but also aerodynamically is pretty damn good as well. If you're looking for your first bike to maybe get into triathlons or time trialing, maybe the E117 is an option for you. This bike is done very competitively price-wise. They do two builds at £3,000, £4,500, and you can buy a frame set only for £2,500. Time trialing was the first racing that I did. You don't need a time trial bike to do it. You can do it on a road bike, you can do it on any kind of bike that you own. But if you started doing a few local club time trials and are looking for what would be the next gain to help you get faster, something like the E117 could be a really good option to consider. It also means, because it uses a standard stem and a more simple base bar, you've got a lot of flexibility to sort of dial in and tweak and adjust your fit to what will work best for you. Ultimately, the biggest drag on a time trial or triathlon bike is the rider. Making sure the fit works well for you is going to be more important than going for something that's crazy fully integrated. You're better to have the fit done first, refine that, get used to it and get comfortable, and then you can look at how you can get that even faster again. One of the things I love about time trialing and triathlons is just fascinating understanding and finding ways to tweak and advance your setup to get more aerodynamic. How can you get that additional 1-2%? As I've mentioned, I've spent a lot of time in the wind tunnel in the past. I'm very lucky to have been able to have done that, and I've been able to test my position on several different bikes as well. What I have learned is actually, in terms of position, my position on the E119 is probably the best that I've ever had in terms of the CDA is in probably 0.3 lower than it has ever been before. We generally do my setup based on a 24-hour time trial position. So it's got to be comfortable enough for me to sustain it for as long as possible. My bike is built up kind of interestingly, actually. The base bar is the one which is designed for the frame from Argon 18, but I'm using some of Aerocoach's Ascalon extensions. These are the inward hand grips. Originally I had the straight hand grips, but I've changed them basically for comfort for me. After breaking my wrists, the angle after a long period of time starts to get quite uncomfortable. So these inward grippers allow my hands to sit in a way more neutral position, which puts less strain on where I broke my wrists and therefore more comfortable. The wheels are from Aerocoach as well. Very lucky to be good friends with them as a brand and the people behind the brand, and they've supported me for many years, and I believe that they make some of the fastest time trialing and triathlon wheels out there. The front wheel is their 100mm Titan front wheel, super deep wheel. Tests really well, and there's many World Tour teams using this wheel unofficially. Just watch a time trial at the Tour de France. The rear wheel, which has got a very interesting wavy woo bit around it, is their Orbit disc wheel. Tests super fast and it looks really cool. And that's 90% of cycling, right? Looking good. I've been very lucky to test my position and tweak things over many years of doing time trialing. And one of the things that I found that I have to do is ride a 165 crank. Now, on my road bikes, I ride a 170 crank, mountain bike, 170 crank. So in terms of position, the shorter crank arm, the 165 one, means that I'm not kicking up into my stomach and chest so much, and it feels more comfortable. And also, I don't know whether it does or not, but I feel like I'm spinning a higher cadence with a shorter crank arm, but that might be subjective and in my brain. Chainring sizes of this generally will change based on events and changes left, right and center all the time. But at the moment on this bike I'm running Dura-Ace Di2 12 speed with a 54-38 chainring on it. It's a pretty big gear, but it's not crazy. Previously I'd ran 62-48, I think I ran. So previously I've ridden much bigger gears, but just on the basis of what the riding is like where I live in the Peak District, I wanted to have a kinder gear for getting up some of the climbs. Cassette 11-36, so it's actually quite a big cassette, but it means that there's quite a good range on that cassette as well. One of the things I've learned over the years of time trialing is actually if you can have less tighter kinks in the chain overall, you're going to have a more efficient setup and therefore probably faster. So you kind of always want to be sitting in the middle of the cassette, not right at the bottom, not right at the top. And if you're in that kind of middle bit, the chain is not bent as tight and therefore less friction. Interesting stuff. In terms of riding, what I found with the E119 is actually, first of all, it feels fast. It's a fast bike. It feels fast. It's like Pac-Man, or even better, Super Mario. This is what it feels like to me. One of the things that I didn't expect was actually it's quite comfortable. And I think in the process of designing this frame, yes, the power transfer is incredibly good. It is incredibly stiff and feels fast, but still feels quite comfortable. Having ridden quite a few different time trial bikes over the years, that was one of the big takeaways I've had from it, is that it is comfortable. And to say that about a time trial bike feels weird, but also kind of great. Pleasant surprise, pleasant surprise. So Argon 18 have got a really great range of different time trial and triathlon bikes. They're all disc brake, they're all very, very fast bikes and offer you a great variety of different price points and usages depending on what you want to do. Like I've stressed, if you're in the UK, you can use triathlon bikes in time trials. There's no rules that say you can't. But if you're in Europe or abroad, and many of your time trials might be governed by the UCI, and therefore you might be restricted to having to race on UCI compliant time trial bikes. In that case, have a look at the E118. If you have any questions about the E119 or any of the other time trial and triathlon bikes in Argon 18's range, please drop a comment below and I'll answer them the best I can. And if I can't answer them, I will reach out to Argon 18 and try and get some answers for you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you for the next one.